Today I was going to cover a few items that have to do with starting out from scratch. So one thing though I wanted to cover right away was the fact that we already do have some pretty excellent guides. So let me just share those with you. There we go. I believe you're seeing this screen. Yes, you are. And this is the Cantabile guides, the user guides. And it's these webinars are no replacement for looking at the guides. And there are also a whole bunch of walkthrough videos available at cantablesoftware.com/support. You got video walkthroughs galore. And this is a playlist that you can drop down, take a look at all of the different ones that are there. And here we go, view full playlist. There we are. So these are some of the walkthrough videos that already are in existence. So I definitely recommend taking a look at those. And again, the user guides, and Derek Cook's also did a really good, Derek Cook did a very good Cantabile guide on his setup that he actually uses in his real world setup. And then there's the glitch-free book, which is worth taking a look at. Free ebook on tuning Windows PCs for reliable real-time audio. Okay? So, just wanted to make sure everybody noted that and definitely take a look at the user guides. Okay, let's go ahead and go to my desktop. I've created a few different versions of Cantabile, and these are copies of the plugin. And let me go to properties and I'll show you how I create these. Like here's one, and I'm going to call this one Cantabile Performer. What you do is you go into the properties you make a shortcut for Cantabile, and then you go into the properties and say /config : then quote mark, and then you give it any name you want. Cantabile Performer Lessons is what I'm doing here for this one. So this is for Performer, and I hit apply. And the start in, because you're making a shortcut, it'll know where to start. But this is the secret. It's going to create this kind of a thing. Okay? And I got the Sunday shows opened up here. Alright, so let me click OK. I'll do the same thing for this one. For solo. And hit it. And this one for light. So now I'll have 3 different versions of Cantabile that open in different licenses. Or you can make another use for this is to have 2 different setups for different hardware setups. Like say you have one setup at your studio, one setup for home. So you can open up the other setup that'll have different settings and plugins lists. Now the plugins list might not change if you're just using your laptop and moving it from place to place. But this makes it so that you can easily have a completely different bunch of settings and bring your songs in, and they'll still work. And I'm going to show the whole thing about aliases in a bit too. Okay, the reason I have these 2 open is because you can save yourself a lot of time. I've already got a background rack, plugins cache, plugins list, and settings for my Sunday show that I do. So once I get this started, I'm going to show. Let's go ahead and start it. So I bring this up, and I select my license. Use that one. And it takes me to the start through screen. But you'll also see that look what's just been created. A new folder in my app data local top 10 software folder has suddenly appeared. Cantabile Performer Lessons. So if I want to save myself all the issue of going through all these steps now, this folder has already been created. So I can go and copy the info from a previously existing hardware and plugin setup and background rack into this one rather than going through all of these steps. But I'm going to go through these steps anyway. because I wanted to show off how I do the initial setup and discuss some things. So, I got my Mo2 audio. I will do this later. I will add more instruments later on. And hit next. And here we have an external synth. This, I'd rather have it have a name, of course, than just be called external synth. So I'm going to just delete that one. Oh, I can't delete yet. That's for later. So we'll go ahead and just start with this bass setup. And the one thing I don't want to do, though, I don't want to start this up and have it search for my plugins right now, because Monday's show we found out how tedious and painful that is. And I could go browse for my my presets and banks folder and put it in there. Okay. And here we have the basic setup, and doesn't have any VSTs or anything yet. Okay. So I am going to go ahead and I'm going to close this, and I'm going to copy my plugins cache and plugins JSON into this new one, so it doesn't have to search through everything. So just pull in this copy here and replace the files that are already there. I'm going to go ahead and do the settings manually initially for this, and then later on I'll do a replacement of the settings. Now I can start this up, and I don't have settings, so I'm going to have to go into options and now add the VST. Hopefully it's not going to be painful. So we'll add just the usual strangers, and that should work. Oh, that can be ignored. Okay, so that was just... And fortunately, look at that. The scan took no time, because I already copied my scan in from this other show. So that's very happy news, because boy, oh boy, I think Monday we managed to talk for almost 10 minutes while I scanned all my plugins. So I'm really glad we didn't have to go through that. Okay, so let's see. I made a list of sort of items that we could go through today. And I very seldom use this setup here. Let's go ahead and go full screen. I don't use this tool very often, mostly because for me, I usually, when I have all of my stuff loaded in, I just have too many items on both the left and right side, too many inputs and outputs. And it makes it a long scroll, whereas I prefer, in my case, to just have the drop downs and where I can add a root. And I've got a nice quick drop down that shows all of my whole list. My list goes pretty much the full page down normally. But right now it doesn't have anything assigned to anything. So let's go ahead and go into options. Like I said, we'll fiddle around with this part. So I'll go ahead and assign this. I've got my main keyboard I'll use for there we go, complete control. And I'm not doing any filters yet. And I'm going to add the on-screen keyboard, of course, is already in there. External synth, I'd rather rename that. I'll call that Yamaha TX81Z upper for now, because I have two of them. And I'm going to get to aliases in a second. Now, I can tell it that no matter what comes in, to always map it to the channel that this thing likes. So let's see, my TX81Zs are on, the upper one is on port 4 of this action. It's showing all of my different items that I've got, and it always is in channel 6. So now it'll go to the correct port. This is a Mo2 MIDI Express XT. So it's on port 4 and channel 6. And so, okay, so I have a instrument. There's a hardware instrument. And I have a keyboard. Let's add another input port. So I have two keyboards. And we'll just use my complete control. This is the MP. This is the S49 Mark II. So, and Omni, and we'll call it that. NI S49. So now I have a few MIDI input ports, and I've got one synth as an output. Now I'm going to need an incoming port for the audio for this, and so I have to add for the because it's a synth. So I call this Yamaha upper audio, and a good idea is to have this respond to gains. You can show it in the monitor panel, and now I have to assign it to its inputs. Oh, it uses the SPDIF in. So let's add a channel, and it's coming in SPDIF left and SPDIF right. And for my mic input, I've got mic 1. It already knew that. This was my mic inputs. And my main out, it already put that in automatically, and I'm sending these out there too. And the audio engine I'm using, of course, is what I set up when I started up the thing. There's a few different things you can change, like you can go to very high quality sample rate conversion, which you typically don't need. An output level threshold of 80% is fantastic. A lot of people like the double precision audio, so it's another thing to look at. And while I'm in here, let me just look at plugin options, and you see I've got these. I don't know how that ended up there. Let's see if I can delete it. Oops, there. Remove. There we go. Now this is one of my dummy outs that I use for recording in Cantabile itself. So I'll show you again, though we discussed this Monday, that I add stereo output ports. This one's called out channel 10 reverb. And this one I do not assign to anything. You'll notice I did not assign it to anything. You don't need to, because the only thing you really want it for is so that it shows up in this list, out channel 10 reverb, so I can record the reverb content. And as I missed before, you have to create a new, and tell it where. File name format we'll just leave there as a standard, and call it setup 1. And now I can check items in here as to what I want to record, include in the recording. If I want my final mix out to the ultralight, like if I'm streaming, I might select that instead of main speakers, or I can go ahead and record it all, because it really doesn't matter. Record whatever's going to the voice meter, and record all my MIDI inputs. So get my microphone directly in, and just be grabbing anything that I have. There's my hardware synth, get its audio, get its MIDI input, etc. And so then you can save these, and usually I save my MIDI inputs from my keyboards, and that's a good thing. And I go ahead and say save. And call it main recorder. Now I can call this up in the future. I'm going to set it as the default. And there you have it. We have now a recording set up, and I can make any of these with the green button work with the auto record so that when I start playing, any of those things will trigger it to come on by itself. All right. Here we go. Oh, yes. In the recording menu, this is kind of an important thing here. To set the correct MIDI time format. The original was real time, which simply uses real clock time and no tempo markings. And then you have absolute and relative are more useful because they capture the tempo coming from the metronome. So when you start the transport going, it picks it up. Now, if SMPTE is important to you, you needed this to track. You're playing along with a film, and you're watching the film while you're playing, and so you'll need some SMPTE time to track along with that. You could use that and change the SMPTE time. But pretty much you can always change SMPTE time, but you can't just add on the fly reliably well unless you've got a DAW that's capable of doing that, like Digital Performer can do that. But still, you want it to be set to most likely absolute or relative. That's a good one to be looking at the guide concerning. So you have under recording, there we are. And I believe it's in here. There it is. File names and there it is, time formats. So relative mode events are time stamped such that the recording starts just before the first recorded events, while in absolute mode events will be time stamped using the exact time of the master transport. So it's your call which to use, but for sure, if I'm recording MIDI and I'm using that transport to send clock signals out to my synth in order to control the tempo of the synth, then I want to have one of those, relative or absolute, definitely turned on. And most likely absolute is going to be the best. Maybe it might be the best choice. So absolute, you'll have 50 bars of silence at the start. So if you started when the current master transport was at bar 50, it would be, because you've already been running with your metronome and your recording starts, and it's going to include all that silence time, which you might want. But if you want it to start when you hit the record button and ignore the transport start time, then you would use relative mode. But that's a pretty essential thing to have set because of the fact that a lot of times your synths nowadays are clocked too. Now, a great thing to have in the auto record is the fact that it will stop the recordings after 5 seconds of silence. To me, that's a little short. I usually go to more like 7 or 8, just because I often will, that's about how long till I might get inspired again to play something else in the same vein or same idea with the same patches. And yes, I always discard anything less than 5 seconds long because I don't find those 4-second long pieces to be that inspired, typically. And you can set the noise threshold for what will trigger the recording. That's nice if you're going to use your microphone as the trigger and say something into the mic in order to start the recorder. And I always use the pin. The on-pin things, I just have them set to delete. So, okie dokie. So I wanted to make sure we mentioned that, as long as we're talking about recording and MIDI recording, to be grabbing those timestamps off the transport that way. Because in the other modes, the original 2 modes, you're not going to get any timestamp or for metronome information at all. And I started finding that metronome thing really, really useful. the different tempos that you could set up things and do an entire performance with the tempos in there. All right, so let's go to those folders and let's get these settings dropped in here. So I'm going to go ahead and save myself a bunch of time in the future and go ahead and replace this content. And now I could start it up and everything will already be set up right for all my racks and everything. I won't have to be worrying about chasing after missing components. However, there is still a use case that's fantastic, is the aliases, use of aliases. And you'll notice you can have an old song and you used a different setup. In here. And so, like for Rode NT2000, and that's what you call it now. But in the old days, you used to just call it Rode mic. Well, you can put that in as an alias, and now any song that you load in that used Rode mic as the target for import port won't get confused and won't be showing up with the red missing output. And it'll just know, oh, okay, no problem. And it'll load it in right away. So that's super useful. So this again, this is the processing rack in full blown, where I've got a Frontier just to stop my overloads. So it's got it so it never maxes outside of the green. And that's keeping it. That actually is ideal for streaming. It always stays at that -12 pretty much. But you see, I'm using the reverbs rack, and it's of course again using the states to select between reverbs. There we go. And you see, it's an embedded reverb, an embedded rack. I mean, inside in my processing rack. Any questions about this processing rack? It's, as you can see, I've got, huh?
So it's pretty much the processing rack. Is that an embedded? No, that's not an embedded rack, right? But it has embedded racks within it.
Yes, it has embedded racks in it. The reverbs rack.
Right.
And I didn't need. This is just a plug-in for the limiter. And then
All right. So with all your embedded racks that you have, so if you get a new, I don't know, there's an update on one of the devices or something like that. So then if you have an embedded rack that's used in a bunch of different places, you would need to go and update them, each one. That's one of the things I've sort of, found as a limitation, is that I'm blanking on, you can't have a linked rack in a linked rack. You can only have an embedded rack in a linked rack.
right, not a linked file rack in a linked file rack. That's why you got to bring it in embedded. So I just when I know I made some major updates to one of my embedded racks, and I typically only embed big deal racks that I'm rarely going to touch after I finally set them up. And but then I just delete it and add it back again. Load embedded rack from file, and it comes right in. And so you can't really use replace. I don't think works right because it's the same rack.
Right.
But so you just delete it and put it back in again, and nothing gets lost. Everything turns red that it was pointing at it. You get the red, or the X's, wherever, anything that was pointing to the reverb rack before. But it comes right back again as soon as you put it back in. Yeah, but yeah, that's a little bit of a nuisance, but considering it gets around the limitation of having racks inside of racks, and having nested racks is just so fantastic. So that's how I do that. Anything else?
No?
Okay. Put this over here. Okay, now these are all songs that I went through all of my plugins and found out which ones populated the darn drop down menus. And it's quite a few. And Spark, uh, Titan. I think I have to bring these up. Some synth, subharmonic. These are all old reactor synths that have been around, some of them for 10, 15 years, and they're actually a great discovery to rediscover. And most people that have any of the old Native Instruments complete versions have all of these as part of the thing, and they never used them because they didn't realize that they even existed. Even some of their newer ones, Scanner, Rounds, anything that was a reactor-based synth has the drop downs in it. So that's nice. If you like having these populated, here's a whole ton of things. Razor, Monarch, Molecular, these are all reactor-based. And Monarch's like one of their most popular. And here it is with all of its presets available right from the drop down. So I just thought I'd make a note of that. I might go deeper into some of these synths in the future because a lot of these are super low impact. Monarch's a little high, but most of these are very, very low impact. Flesh is very high. I'm not sure I would use it except by itself for a performance, live performance. The Fury, which is a soft synth, a freebie, that's a copy of the Poly 800, and I happen to have a Poly 800, but I never use its sounds. I don't have any audio outs coming out of it because it's a pain in the neck to keep the batteries in it to keep the sounds alive. So here's a soft synth version, and lo and behold, you can access all the presets. Morphox is another one from same folks as CRAT and Alpha, etc. So it's just so nice having this work, and I don't know why so many modern synths don't. I mean, if Fury works, what are the newer synths doing different that makes it so that Cantabile can't access their preset list? Maybe it's because they have to have browsers because they have so many presets nowadays. That could be it. Alrighty, well, so that's that for today, I think. So there's the second one. A little more organized than Monday's, but they'll get better and better, I take it. And especially as questions start coming in and people have stuff that they want me to cover. I think very soon we'll be getting beyond doing basics, and people are going to be making me do some homework to, really dive in and deep on things. And hopefully so we'll get some guest stars also. Okay? All right. Well, I'll talk to you later. We'll do another.
Thank you.
Do Monday. On Sunday, I'm going to do light. Sunday night, I'll work on light. On Monday, I'll do light and solo capabilities, and then on Wednesdays, I'll do performer-based stuff. Alrighty.